Hello friends, hello woodland creatures. This is going to be the color balance and best pack one pick ones for Bloomburrow. Short and sweet, hopefully less than 15 minutes, and an explanation if you haven't seen these videos before. All the stats presented here are based on how often a first pick would lead to a winning run, and all the stats are based on the dataset from 17lands.com. So the color balance is pretty predictable if you've been playing the set. At the top is white, then black, then green, but all three of those, white, black, and green, are basically in a virtual tie. Then there's a drop off into red, and then at the bottom is blue. And I want to say that blue isn't as much of a disaster as other bad colors have been in the set. There are a lot of vocal defenders for blue and Bloomburrow, and I have to say the people that are sticking with it, they haven't done horribly. But I do want to emphasize this is like a small group. Like this is blue is very, very underpicked relative to the other colors, and it's much easier to just take a green, black, or white card. And while we're on the topic, like white hasn't been a bad color in a limited set in I think like 5 years or something. So someone might want to look into that. I want to talk about, before we get into the top 10, the top commons, which are also white. Number 20 and number 22 are Intrepid Rabbit and Warren Elder, both of which are white bunnies. Green white rabbits is a very good typal deck, and it's the type of deck that you probably want to be in if you don't have any bomb rares. And I should say, like, it's also my comfort deck for the format. The nice thing about Intrepid Rabbit and Warren Elder is that they aren't hard commits into rabbits either. Intrepid Rabbit is good at everything. It goes wide. It targets two things for Valiant. It expends four, and it makes a token for an on tribe token. Warren Elder is a little bit more of a reacher to getting up to number 20, but um, yeah, it's picked a lot less than the other commons that I looked at, but I've played with it a few times. And it's got good stats on turn two, and later in the game, it becomes basically a must kill creature because it's going to pump everything up. I've played with like four of these in a deck, and it did not feel bad at all. So I'm gonna say it's probably better than I was giving credit for. It's probably better than you were giving it credit for. Look out for Warren Elder. And last thing, both of these cards are stat pumpers. They give +1/+1. And Bloomburrow, most of the creatures in the set are pretty small. So like every small stat boost goes a long, long way in this set. Like you're not going to be like running into giant Eldrazi or anything. But I might talk about some giant creatures on this list. So that's not exactly how the format plays out most of the time. One of the big guys. Number 10, best pack one pick one is Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. It's a big mythic dragon, and red's a little mediocre, but you didn't think that was going to keep the pushed flashy dragon off the list, did you? It's huge, it's in the air, it's a titan, which means it's got an effect on enter, it's got an effect on attack. So this is just a modern designed bomb mythic, and the only thing that's really holding it back is that it's relatively expensive at 5 mana and it is in double red. Number 9 is Season of Loss. Now, the seasons are a bit complicated, but they come with a lot of power. This is a sorcery for 3 black black, and the typical mode going on is that each player is going to sacrifice 3 creatures, and then you draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. So it's like wipe the board, you draw 2 to 3 cards. If you're really behind, you can just make everyone sacrifice 5 creatures, and if you're really ahead, it's got a mode each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So sometimes you can just dome people for 5 with this too. So it's a very, very flexible board wipe in a slow color that wants to drag out the format. And most of the time, board wipe with upside is going to end up on this list, and usually that comes in white. I think it's even more powerful in black. And the fact that it randomly can just do 5 to the face sometimes is pretty crazy. It is a little bit suspiciously low at number 9, but I should say everything but the top two are basically pretty close to tied to each other in score. So, in a data dump, this might end up being number 3. Of course, it might also just be a problem that double black is kind of tough. Like the black commons aren't great in this set. So if you first pick this, there aren't that many good black commons to fill out your deck with. So it's just something to watch out for. Number 8 is Ygra, Eater of All. She's 3 black green for a 6/6 elemental cat. She's got Ward, Sacrifice of Food, which would normally be a hard cost to pay, except for her second ability, which turns all other creatures into foods. And lastly, she's got a third ability, Whenever food is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put two counters, 2+1/+1 counters onto her. So Ygra gets hilariously huge in every game that I've seen her. I play a lot of rabbits, and in those games, like her stats get pushed up into the 30s. She's kind of actually clunky in the way that she plays because everything's a food, so it's very easy for both players to gain life. It's pretty hard for her to actually finish a game despite being this gigantic bomb. Um, but her nice edge is that black and green are good colors, and they're very, very good colors at holding bombs. Like green can play Ygra early, black can recur her if she dies. So this card's a little bit dorky in play, but I'm still not surprised that she made the list just because big black green mythic usually does end up being a very, very good card. Number 7 is Thought-Stalker Warlock, a card that was a bit of a sleeper until people actually started picking it up and reading it. It's 2 in the black for a 2/2 lizard warlock with menace. When he enters, the opponent discards a card, but if they've lost life this turn, you can look at their hand and pick what they discarded instead. So this lizard is great at taking like a good start and just making it into a game over on turn 3 by taking out the only thing that can get them back into the game. If you chain them together, it's even more demoralizing, but very often that's just unnecessary. Very strong and common. Number 6 is another uncommon, and it's Patchwork Banner. This one was a sleeper, and I think it is still sleeping. It's got the highest pick rate boost out of any card that's on this list, but it's still picked pretty low. So it's a 3-minute artifact that can tap for any color of mana, and as it enters, you pick a creature type, and it boosts all creatures you control of that type. So, like I said at the beginning, small stat boosts go a long way, and this is a permanent stat boost to your favorite tribe. So I want to say on rate, this is fine if it just buffs up one creature. Like that's fine. And then it goes crazy if you're dedicated to a type. And then if you're on rabbits, it's just a nuclear bunny bomb. Banner is pretty insane, and people should just stop passing it. It's really good. Pick it up. Number 5 is Gev Scaled Scorch. It's black red for a 3/2 lizard with ward, pay 2 life. If your opponents have lost any life, any creatures you cast are going to come in with a +1/+1 counter, and you can guarantee this on lizards because the last ability is whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev deals 1 damage to target opponent. So I wasn't really sold on lizards at the start of Bloomburrow. I thought like black's not going to be too good at being aggressive. It turns out they are pretty good at being aggressive, and Gev is a unfair tribal lord in a pretty good tribe. So number 5. The number 4 is Warren Warleader, also kind of a lord, but just for every creature. It's 2 white for a 4/4 with offspring for 2 more mana. It and its token baby have an ability that triggers whenever you make an attack. You can choose to make an attacking 1/1 rabbit, or you buff all attackers +1/+1. And note here that the Warleader itself doesn't need to attack. You just need to have a creature that is attacking so you can trigger it immediately. And there's no real secrets with this thing. It's just really unfair, and it's in a good color. I guess just like a tip if you're playing digitally, make sure you stack the triggers in the right order because I did make that mistake. Number 3 is Valley Mightcaller. Mightcaller, I barely know her. It's a single green mana for a 1/1 frog warrior with trample, and whenever a frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel enters, he gets a +1/+1 counter. So all these types are the green creature types, and as long as you're playing a green deck, you're going to be throwing a bunch of counters onto Mightcaller. And if you're on frogs or rabbits, then it's going to be a ton of counters. It's a very, very, very strong 1-drop, probably the scariest 1-drop to see on the other side of the table since Ragavan, I think. It's very strong. Number 2 is Beza, the Bounding Spring. Everything before this point was around like a 24-point score, and this one's jumping up to 25. So there's a bit of a gap between the rest of the cards and up to Beza. I'm not really sure on the Lord. I think she's technically a calamity beast, but she's also one of the good guys because she brings things back to life. But, anyways, if you're playing against her, it is a calamity. It's 2 white for a 4/5 elemental elk, and she has a paragraph of catch up mechanics. The most important ones are if you're behind on creatures, she makes 2 1/1 fish, and if you're behind on cards, then she draws a card. So I kind of said this before, like a card doesn't need to be a giant game-winning bomb that single-handedly wins the game to end up on this list. Like a good drafter just needs a card that gets you ahead, and then you just stay ahead and win the game. And Beza, the help that she gives you to win the game, like scales with how far behind you are, how much you need help. She gives you more help, so covers a lot of different scenarios. And if you're doing fine, like you get one of these effects, and it feels pretty good, a pretty strong card. And if you're super behind, like Beza's usually the only card in the set that can bail you out. So that's why it's number two. It just saves games for you. And number one is Valley Questcaller. So you see, I was drawing your attention to pump effects. Questcaller is one in the white for a 2/3 rabbit warrior. Whenever a rabbit, bird, bat, or mouse enters, you get to scry one, and all those creature types also get +1/+1. And these are the white tribes. So I want to say also this is a fairly low score for a number one on the list. And Bloomburrow doesn't have any gigantic omega bombs, but Questcaller does a pretty good impression of one. It's a cheap rare. It's in the best color, and as long as you're playing a white heavy deck with lots of creatures, it's got the potential to just carry the game for you. It's mass pump permanently on the cheap creature with good stats. You don't need much more than that. And before the end, since I didn't really showcase any blue cards, I did want to talk about the highest performing blue pick in Bloomburrow, Thundertrap Trainer. It's one in a blue for a 1/2 with Offspring for 4 mana. When it enters, you look at the top 4 of your deck and you put a non creature spell into your hand. I was kind of flummoxed on why this card was doing so well. It feels decent in otters, but I was told by someone else that its real place to shine is with frogs, where it gets flickered with repeated values. So it's a good rate card. Like a 1/2 is actually a decent stat line at blocking rabbits. Like I think of everything in context of rabbits. So if you are on the lookout for a sign to go into blue, Thundertrap Trainer is the best sign for that. And that's it. Thanks for watching the end, and have good drafts.